Good morning.
Good morning.
Hope everybody's well today. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the February 18th Commonwealth Transportation Board meeting. We'll start with our workshop here this morning. If I might, if you will join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I was just going to say something to you.
Before we get started, let me make a few remarks. First, you see Commissioner Britch is not up here. He's in a weather call right now, briefing the governor and others throughout the Commonwealth leadership on sort of where we are with weather today. I'm going to have to leave here at about 20 minutes from now to join the governor for a short piece of time, and then I'll be back. And in that, my absence, Vice Chair Kaspertz will assume the chair's role and run the meeting. The commissioner will be back probably when I come back, so he's going to be out until then. And let me just say this, and I can speak to it later in my other remarks, but transportation has been incredibly busy in the last few weeks and months. Obviously, the General Assembly brings all sorts of busyness to our schedules, and it's been a busy General Assembly. But on top of that, we've had these severe weather events, and we got smacked again down in Southwest Virginia. We've spent a lot of time with that. Governor was down there again Sunday to see what's going on there. And they've just, unfortunately, have really gotten smacked this winter between the hurricanes, and now we've had flooding and a lot of roads out down there, trees down from the last storm. We're getting ready to get whacked again in Virginia, which is why we're so focused on that. I have to tell you that VDOT and the rest of the team just has done a great job getting prepared for these things. We're looking at, a couple days ago, our best weather forecasts were saying maybe up to 18 inches in Hampton Roads. Most of y'all aren't from Hampton Roads, but 18 inches in Hampton Roads is like 12 feet in Minnesota. And so, yeah. And now we're looking at maybe 8 to 10. So it's still real numbers. It's the highest snowfalls are in the very eastern part of the state predicted. And this will come tomorrow and Thursday. So we're extremely busy trying to get ready for this. And we apologize that I got to step out, and the commissioner's not here right now, but we'll get back in line. So just a very, very busy time.
Mr. Secretary,
Yes.
along the lines you mentioned, I want to express appreciation to those districts, primarily in the eastern part of the state, that sent people and equipment to help address the areas in the southwest. They made a great impact by their work, and it was terrific to see the movement of resources as needed across the Commonwealth to meet needs. So thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah, they've done a great job. And I will tell you that the governor is extremely personally focused on these events. And he, really gets in deep and makes sure we're doing everything that we can do to, one, prepare, and then two, to react after we've done the preparation. And so it's just, unfortunately, we have to do this. We started, as you remember, this way on our first week after the previous problem with snow on 95. And so it seems like we're starting and ending in the same way. But in any case, thank you, sir. And the commissioner and his team do a great job moving around resources. And it's not just us. VDEM's very involved. State Police is very involved. National Guard is very involved. So it's really 4 main agencies that get involved in this. And we are deeply involved in it to try to make sure that we do everything we can to keep people safe first and keep them moving second. The first item on the agenda this morning is an audit finding on a contract award on some temporary steel repairs. Lisa is going to start us out, and then we're going to hear from Kevin Gregg. Morning, Ms. Pride, welcome.
Morning.
Hope you're well.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Secretary, members of the board.
And let me say this is for awareness, right? Whenever something goes awry, I want everybody to know about it. I'm not the guy that likes to hide things and just move on, or not even hide them, but just not highlight them. I like to highlight the things that go wrong so we can learn from them, and there's total transparency. And so here we go.
Well, good morning. I'll be doing this alone today. Kevin's not here, but I will share with you the finding, our after-action review, and our next steps to avoid this happening going forward. The Auditor of Public Accounts completed VDOT's fiscal year 24 audit, and as part of their audit testing, they reviewed a contract that was awarded by our Administrative Services Division for temporary bridge repairs in the Richmond District. That contract required CTB review and approval, but it was awarded without it. It was an on-call contract to provide temporary steel repairs to address safety. The bid received was $9.8 million based on estimated quantities, and it was a one-year contract with 4 renewal options. Curtis Contracting was selected as a contractor for this work, and it was awarded back in August of 2023. There were 5 task orders issued on the contract. 4 of them have been completed, and 1 is still ongoing and expected to be completed the end of this month. The total work ordered under the contract was a little over $4.5 million. The scope of work on all of the task orders was the same, except for the installation, the location and quantities. But it was all to provide temporary repairs to our bridges until permanent repairs could be made. We completed an after-action review, and for those of you that may not be aware of the types of contracts awarded by ASD, it's mainly goods like our salt and equipment and vehicles and various services, as well as technology and facility design and construction. We reviewed the 965 contracts that ASD awarded in fiscal year 24, and 3 of those contracts required approval by the CTB. 2 of them were brought forward and the board approved, and this 1 contract was not. So the actual contract usage, again, was $4.5 million, lower than the estimated quantities bid. But we further noted that the procurement office, in their processes, failed to identify the procurement request as one that needed CTB approval at any time during the procurement process. And so lastly, we believe insufficient administrative oversight resulted in contract award without CTB review and approval. For next steps and future mitigation, we canceled the contract on January 17th. The final open task order, as I mentioned, will be completed by the end of this month. The Richmond District is working on identifying current needs for a new contract that will be advertised, and responsive bids will be brought to the CTB for review and approval as appropriate. In our administrative services procurement offices, we've also looked at process improvements to avoid this happening going forward. The main one being a new database field that we've added to our procurement request tracking system that will flag requests with estimates greater than $5 million. This will allow the ASD director to have more visibility and be able to review detailed scope of work for contracts that exceed $5 million and ensure that we're having the appropriate discussions internally with divisions and districts, and making sure that we're ultimately compliant for CTB review and approval. And I'll just close by saying, just candidly, this was a pretty plain and simple, and are putting process measures in place to avoid having the same mistake in the future. So I answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Barrett. Anyone have any questions? Okay, so bottom line is we made an error. We fixed our error and we toughened up the system a bit, make sure it doesn't happen again. But nothing nefarious here, just lots of moving parts and sometimes we trip. So thank you, Elisa, appreciate it very much. Next item on the agenda is the Scott Powell. Powhite. There's always a great debate in Richmond on how you pronounce it. Is it Powhite? Is it Powhite? Is it Powhite? I always sort of default to the Powhatan kind of thing and call it Powhite. Scott, you're the expert.
Sorry about that.
Welcome.
Appreciate that. So, good morning. I'm here today to provide an update on the Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS, that VDOT is preparing on behalf of Chesterfield County for the Powhite Parkway project. Today's presentation is one in a series of presentations for this project designed to prepare you all and provide information to make a location decision. Per the code reference on the slide, your location decision will represent the preferred alternative, which will be documented in the Environmental Impact Statement. The focus of today's presentation is on the range of alternatives being considered and advanced through the Environmental Impact Statement. But before we get there, a little background and refresh for all of us. Through the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, the county is considering extending Powhite Parkway from Woolridge Road to Hall Street Road. The blue oval on this slide represents the general study area that we are gathering information and considering alternative alignments. It also highlights a few of the other transportation and non-transportation projects that we are informed by as we move through this process. Public involvement is a key piece of an environmental impact statement. In late 2023, early 24, VDOT hosted a virtual study introduction. This was an online opportunity advertised in local newspapers, the project website, and through emails and other mailings. Gave the public an opportunity to review materials, introducing them to the EIS and the project, and invited comment and question to inform the scope of the EIS. In the fall of 2024, we held an in-person meeting near the project area to introduce the range of alternatives that we'll walk through later today. That was coupled with an online opportunity for folks who couldn't make the meeting to review the materials online and provide comment to inform the range of alternatives. Along with public involvement, agency input is crucial to an environmental impact statement. Since October of 2023, we've been working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Federal Highway Administration, the EPA, the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, Chesterfield County, and a collection of other federal and state agencies through monthly meetings to move through the major milestones of the environmental impact statement. One is the purpose and need, which we discussed at the last briefing here. I bring it before you on this presentation as it serves as the primary criteria in the alternative screening process. The two bullets at the bottom, relieve congestion and improve regional connectivity, are the primary criteria used to evaluate the alternatives. We'll get to in a minute. Before we can screen alternatives, we need to come up with an array of options and present those to the public and the agencies. This slide illustrates the 7 build options that were considered, discussed with the agencies, and presented to the public. Options 1A and 1B to the left or the west are new alignment options. The remainder focus on extending or widening existing roadways. In addition to those 7 options, we also considered a no-build alternative, which is required for the environmental impact statement, as well as a transportation system management, transportation demand management, or TSM-TDM option, and a transit-only option. This slide lists those options, notes whether or not they meet the purpose and need, and whether or not they were retained for detailed analysis in the EIS. They aren't always a one-to-one. For example, the no-build alternative does not meet the purpose and need, but is required to be retained. The TSM, TDM, and transit options were found to not meet the purpose and need as standalone alternatives, but that does not preclude them from being added to a preferred alternative or advanced as independent projects. Along with the screening, we take into account what we hear from the public and the agencies with regards to this range of alternatives. Primary concerns focus on private property and community impacts. Also concerned about impacts to properties that are significant to this region, including Horner Park and the Swift Creek Berry Farm. Also a focus on natural resources like wetlands and the Swift Creek Reservoir. And finally, existing and future traffic conditions. So with all that in mind, this slide lists the alternatives that are being retained and advanced through the EIS process. They include the no-build alternative, 2 new alternatives on new alignment labeled 1A and 1B, and 3 alternatives that expand or extend existing roadways, including Otterdale and Duval for alternative 2B, Woolridge Road for alternative 3B, and Route 288 and Hall Street Road for alternative 4. Slide is similar to the first, showing the alternatives that are advancing through. You will note that alternatives 2A and 3A are not on this map. While they met the purpose and need, we are not required to compare alternatives in an environmental impact statement that are deemed too similar. So VDOT and the agencies involved found that 2A and 2B were quite similar, as well as 3A and 3B. So the agencies agreed that 2A and 3A need not be retained. Moving forward, we're scheduled to host a public hearing and comment period this spring that would inform an action by this board to identify a preferred alternative. We'd come back to you late summer for that action, and if we hit those marks, we'd be able to release the draft environmental impact statement for public hearing and 45-day public comment period late this year. As always, that schedule is subject to change as the NEPA process advances. That concludes my presentation for this project. Thank you for your time. Welcome any questions you might have.
Questions? Gentlemen, you all have questions? Anybody have any questions? Ms. Lawson? Thank you. Okay. All right, hearing none, thank you. Appreciate it very much. Chesterfield's continues to be a place with lots going on, and they've got opportunity there to make their traffic better, but also to keep that growth moving. So it's exciting. The next item on the agenda is the Nimmo Parkway project. Mr. Smizik remains. Thank you,
Thank you.
sir. How are you?
This presentation is similar in content to the first, so I'll move through it a little more quickly. But this is an update on the environmental impact statement that VDOT is preparing on behalf of the City of Virginia Beach for their Nimmo Parkway Phase 7B project. This presentation is also focused on the range of alternatives to provide you information to make a location decision later this year. As some background, you may recall the City of Virginia Beach completed an environmental assessment for the proposed 7B alignment, which is illustrated with the dotted yellow line on this map. As part of that process, agency comments, which we'll discuss later, led to elevating the environmental assessment to an environmental impact statement with a commitment that an alternative to improve existing Sandbridge Road would be considered. Existing Sandbridge Road is outlined in the solid yellow line, kind of a U-shape on this figure. Along with that agency involvement, public involvement for this project dates back to the development of the environmental assessment when the city hosted a citizen information meeting in 2018, and then a public hearing in 2022 with the release of the environmental assessment. As we got going with the environmental impact statement, we hosted a virtual citizen meeting in August of 2024. This included a live question and answer session with the project manager, all of which was recorded and presented for a 30-day public comment period to inform the scope of the environmental impact statement. I mentioned the agency input, and that is highlighted in this project by the comments by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service calling for an EIS level analysis. We have worked with those agencies, the EPA, the Department of Environmental Quality, the city, and other federal, state, and local agencies to advance this project through our monthly coordination meetings, same as the previous project. And present the purpose and need as a reminder and as the primary criteria in the alternative screening process as we advance through the range of alternatives. This slide lists the alternatives that were considered in the EA and what are to be considered in the EIS. They include the required no-build alternative, consideration to the TSM-TDM option, much like Powhite, it was found to not meet the purpose and need in the EA or the EIS, but that does not preclude it or the transit option from being advanced in the future. And we have the Nimmo Parkway alternative, which is the 1.8-mile roadway the city had proposed originally, and improvements to existing Sandbridge Road, which would include realigning and elevating about 3.5 miles of existing Sandbridge Road. Both alternatives include a bicycle and shared use path. I've mentioned the comments from the Army Corps and Fish and Wildlife. We did not receive any other comments from agencies or the public identifying new alternatives, just variations of the improved existing alternative. That's due in large part to the surrounding area, which is dominated by the Naval Air Station, Back Bay, and the Back Bay National Wildlife Refuge. Primary concerns highlighted by the public include safety along existing Sandbridge Road and the recurrent flooding and resultant road closures that occur on that roadway.
Sellers?
Before you leave that slide, have you addressed this with our congressional delegation at all about, and you brought this up when we were down there in Hampton Roads for the governor's conference, and I went and drove over there and went on to Dam Neck. And, you know, it's not a very populated area. And so have you met with the congressional delegation to ask them why maybe they can't give up some sort of land or some way to get through there so that there could be an alternative? I mean, have we tried to meet with our senators at all?
So VDOT has not as part of this project. We leave that to the city.
Virginia Beach.
Yeah, we leave that to the city and their coordination.
Just as a consideration, because especially at the front end of the base, they do have some land out there. And I know they want to say national security reasons, but they could make something work, I think, and maybe talk to the senators and looking at that Sandbridge Road, I mean, I could see it flooding. There was water there, and it hadn't rained in a few, probably weeks when we were down there, and there was standing water pretty close to the road. So I could see it be a flooding issue. But it seems to me it might be a lot cheaper to try and get the Navy to play ball than to go and deal with a swamp, right, and try and make a swamp work as a road. But I just know in the Fredericksburg district, we deal with Brook Road flooding over there by Crow's Nest, and we haven't figured that battle out. So I just worry if we put a bunch of money on Sandbridge Road, you're going to have flooding anyways. So again, maybe have Virginia Beach reach out to the senators and say, could the Navy please play ball a little bit and be a good neighbor?
Come back next time, we'll definitely be able to summarize what the city has discussed with them. And I'll point out also,
Mr. Stan had a question.
okay, sorry.
Does the cost of these two alternatives enter into this equation at all?
It does, yes, for sure.
I mean, have you got a estimated cost for the Nimmo Parkway alternative and the improvements to Sandbridge Road alternative?
We do not yet have a cost estimate for the improved existing Sandbridge Road. We've only cleared the concurrence on range of alternatives, so we're just moving into that cost estimating portion now.
Bottom line, in my opinion, living and right in that area, the only alternative is either no build or Nimmo Parkway. The improvements to existing Sandbridge Road is just insanity. is not going to work. It's going to be prohibitively expensive. And to build an MO Parkway alternative, you're not doing any more than than doing the same type of construction they did a mile to the north or west across West Neck Creek. It's going to be an elevated roadway through that swamp. And Laura, I don't think there's any alternative. There's no other land. It's got to go down that right of way that Virginia Beach already owns and has owned for 50 years. So, I mean, the only alternative, in my opinion, is either no build or Nemo Parkway. That's it.
Mr. Coleman.
Just to follow up on that, they really have both ends of this project already completed. You're trying to connect it now. So that's another support for, this has got to get done. It's the only path forward. Would you agree?
Wasn't very good planning, if the truth be known.
Well,
Ms. Sellers,
and-
Ms. Sellers, please wait to be recognized. Did you have a question?
I do. Sorry.
Ms. Sellers, please.
And I think that's why driving down there and seeing how Sandbridge has developed, and looking at Dam Neck, and it's time to bring in that congressional delegation and say, there has to be some discussion of how the Navy just cut off that access. Everything developed, and, you know, they're supposed to be good neighbors. That's the whole point. And so this access, and you can't just build out Sandbridge Road. That's not. And I'm not from there, but I'm going to tell you, we fight it every day. We got a beaver there on Brook Road that just gives VDOT, you know, a whole lot of grief. I got some solutions for it, but apparently that's not how you deal with it. You know, and you got a swamp there at Sandbridge Road, so you guys are going to be dealing with that. And then, so Virginia Beach should probably bring in their congressional delegation and talk about how you got a whole ton of homes down there, and the Navy saying, well, we want to keep this destination of beachfront property is just not going to be good enough. And maybe it's time to bring your senators in and say, dear senators, we need some help.
Mr. Coleman.
I think all those are good points, if it would have been done 10 years ago. But I don't think that with SEAL Team 6 and the climate in the world right now, there's going to be much appetite for any kind of leeway of getting through that base to get to Sandbridge. I mean, they just aren't or welcome that traffic flow that comes through there. So that's my, and again, they've got each end built. They're missing that centerpiece that this addresses.
Ms. Sellers.
Their new facility isn't being built there according to what was approved.
You go back to the,
Well, we can talk about that another time, but they have a whole other facility going in somewhere else. Because I looked that up too to see if there was some money that maybe the Navy could put towards it. And they do have some money going to some facility, but it's not in Dam Neck. It's somewhere else in Virginia Beach that I had to look up. I was trying to find you guys money for this project in the NDAA, but it's in a different part of Virginia Beach. So they're building a facility for them, but it's not here on this annex, so.
It's at Little Creek.
I hear ya, but no, they want to save that because it's beautiful, pristine oceanfront property. I would want to save it too, but that's not a reason to save your base.
Please continue.
Based on the screening against the against the purpose and need, and public and agency comment, we're left with 3 alternatives to be considered in the environmental impact statement. The required no build, the construction of the Nemo Parkway alternative, which is about approximately 1.8 miles long. I mentioned before, it includes bike lanes and a shared use path and would be built at an elevation with bridging to avoid future flooding. And improvements to existing Sandbridge Road, approximately 3.5 miles long, same shared use path and bike lane. And as we've discussed and mentioned, there would be some required realignment and elevation to avoid flooding and to avoid cutting off private property access that already exists along that roadway. graphic just summarizing the two build alternatives that will be advanced through the EIS. Moving forward, we plan on holding a public hearing and comment period this spring to inform this board's identification of the preferred alternative. We'd come back again this spring to brief you on the results of that and seek an action on a preferred. And if we hit those marks, the draft environmental impact statement could be released as early as fall of 2025. As always, the schedule is subject to change. Concludes my presentation. Thank you all for your time and welcome any questions you might have.
Other questions? Scott, thank you. Good presentation. Next up is Mr. Todd. Welcome.
Good morning.
Our favorite topic, rail industrial access. Yours as well, of course.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Hope you're all doing well this morning. So the DeLong Company applied for $750,000 of rail industrial access funding. My hope is that this presentation will show that the project links to past improvements to rail in and around the port. The project details show the greater site development as well as the rail construction. The project scores well in multiple categories and therefore has our recommendation. So the first thing I wanted to start with is just how this links to some of the port investments that have been going on for the past nearly 2 decades. Starting in 2006, we did a rail expansion at Virginia International Gateway, then was APM terminals for nearly 3 miles of on-dock rail expansion. We continued working with the port in FY14 to reestablish rail service at the Richmond Marine Terminal, which connects directly to the barge service that's there. Then moved on to the inland port in FY18, 1 mile of on-dock rail expansion there as well. And then finally just completed this past summer at NIT. They have doubled the capacity of the central rail yard there. That expansion was very sizable, $83 million, $20 million from DRPT, and actually increased the port's overall capacity for rail, increased it by 31%. So we've made these kind of programmatic investments over the years in and around the port to make what the port has the largest reach, rail reach of any East Coast port. And that's something that they tout often. They have it right up on their website, one of the first landing pages that you get to. And so it really shows the strength of rail service in and around the Port of Virginia. And, over the last year, we've had 3 applications for rail industrial access that explicitly stated that rail service connecting directly to the port was their primary location decision. So they're locating here in Virginia because we have good rail service at the port. So moving into the specific project details for the DeLong application. The DeLong Company is an agribusiness specializing in global distribution of grains, oils, byproducts, and they're actually the 5th largest container exporter in the U.S. And as I noted, the location decision here is the specific access via the port to international markets. This is their first location in Virginia, and I wanted to bring up this map just to show that their headquarters is in Wisconsin, just outside Chicago, and you can see they really cluster a lot of their development in that area. They have a cluster in New York as well, and so our hope really is that this is the first of many investments in our region, as they do tend to cluster their development in their company locations. The site itself has a large linear footprint, which is really conducive to rail service. Overlaying the engineering plans, they are constructing a 4-track bundle with multiple new turnouts that feed into the transload facility. And then they have a direct rail connection to the Portsmouth Marine Terminal. So the total investment in the site is nearly $27 million. That includes the track work, but also the grain storage, the loading and unloading facilities, and the weigh scales. The rail industrial access funding, however, is only applicable to the rail construction, which is estimated at $2.2 million for a total of 7,400 feet of track improvements. And their request amount is $750,000. And as I noted, they essentially import soybeans, corn, grain from the Midwest and Northeast, and then through the port they will be shipping out those containers internationally: Europe, North Africa, Middle East, and South Asia. So moving on to the application scoring. So we have the raw data that we collect under the performance data column, the score that this project specifically achieved, and then the maximum in each category. This project scores really well in the carloads. 3,000 new carloads is a really impressive number, especially for the Rail Industrial Access Program. And they also have a really high private match, so they get the maximum points in all those categories. Even though they score 0 in those yes-no categories of economic development and being served by a short line, it still scores 56 points, which is above the 50-point minimum threshold for our recommendation. And so, as always, today just presenting the project to you with our recommendation. Next month would be a resolution of approval, and then moving on to executing the project and implementing.
Questions for Mr. Todd? Mr. Coleman?
I'm sorry.
This is another one of those very important projects. This is a company with a proven track record. This is not a pie in the sky. This is an established company. This will work. They could have gone to any other place, but they chose Eastern Virginia. So as far as an economic development driver and just a great way to encourage more movement of freight through the Port of Hampton roads. Fred and I both have been in touch with this gentleman, the CEO of the company. He reached out to us, and he had some really good comments. He responded very quickly. So I'm glad that this is being done. I want more of it to be done. So it's got my support. I think it has Fred's as well.
Chairman.
Mr. Lawson?
Along the same vein, you talked about they like to cluster their development. Do you all try to direct them to, say, the inland port and install silos there for importing and exporting grains?
I mean, this is our first contact with them. Obviously, if they have interest in expanding in Virginia, we are there to support them, along with VDP, which is often the way that these type of developments come through to us. So absolutely, want to bring business to Virginia, and that's definitely the point here.
Thank you.
Mr. Coleman?
If I could address that one point, I think going through the inland port would add to cost and time, and those are neither attractive for most businesses. So I would say that they've picked this location for a specific reason, for efficiency, in both of those, cost and money. Because not only is there a chance of export, we handle a lot of soybeans coming out of Brazil when the growing seasons down there, not here. So there's a lot of in and out, and the port's very critical to that. So to be located in Front Royal or some other location wouldn't be as attractive in my mind.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Green?
Just have a general question about the economic development score. That pertains directly to their economic development, but it doesn't give them credit for the support to economic development across the state, does it?
Well, we kind of look at economic development in two ways in the program. One is just how many jobs it creates. The other is where I think you're referring to how it got a score of 0. Basically, what we look at is if it's already been designated as an economic development area by either the local, regional, or state economic development authority in the area. It has not been, that site has not been specifically designated in a, previous plan. So that's why it got the 0. That certainly doesn't take away from its impact of creating jobs, creating more throughput of, goods and everything along those lines. So, yeah, I take your point, but the score is directly related to if it's been designated in a plan already.
I think for distribution, it would be interesting if we looked at a way to give credit to economic development it's creating across the state, because that could be incredibly important to farms across Virginia.
Dr. Smoot.
Thank you. Mike, the 3,000 carloads, is that annually?
Yes.
So is it right to believe that this is probably the largest number of carloads annually of any project we have funded, assuming we fund it?
Not the literal largest, but it is one of the largest. Actually, if I can get back to it, the Catanoan development. Sorry, that took way longer than I thought. The Catanoan development, the Norfolk terminals, actually also has 3,000 as well. Those were both fairly unprecedented numbers and the highest that we've seen. So yeah, and those are both, serving directly through the port.
Well, thank you, because this gets a lot of traffic off the road.
Actually, Mike, a question in that regard. This is new business, I'm assuming. This wouldn't be coming to the port otherwise. So is this really truck replacement? Most applications we're looking at a comparison of the trucks that we're taking off the road, but I would assume in this case, the only way these commodities are moving east is over rail. Yeah. And the question is not truck replacement, but what other port it might go to if we don't secure this for our port.
Right, yeah, as a new site, there is an existing truck traffic coming and going from that site. That's correct, yes. But we do, to your point, get the economic activity, the economic development without the impact to the roadway.
Other questions for Mr. Todd? Mike, before we end this topic, could you kind of bring us up to date on the applications that we've currently considered or have considered from a dollar perspective versus the amount of money that we have to spend on this program? I guess undersubscribed, oversubscribed, where we stand in that.
Oh, yeah, we did actually provide in the last, after the last board meeting, I don't have the number specifically in front of me, top of my head.
Just roughly to give us, again, give us a sense of.
So we share this fund with the Economic Development Access Program at VDOT. It receives $5.5 million a year. We typically fund around $3 million of that.
So undersubscribed.
Yes.
I guess just for the board's sake and from a perspective of encouraging things out in the districts and around the Commonwealth, we've got more money to spend to bring more rail or get more trucks off the road. Other questions, comments? Mr. Todd, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Next up, Ms. Pryor. Smart scale proposed project cancellations.
Good morning, members of the board, Mr.
Good morning.
Chairman. I have two proposed smart scale cancellations. Both are in Northern Virginia. I'll run through them fairly quickly. The first project is in Columbia Pike Smart Corridor in Northern Virginia. Just as a reminder to the board, once a project is selected through either the district grant program or the high priority program, only the board can cancel the project. The Columbia Pike Smart Corridor project was submitted by Arlington County in round 2 of Smart Scale, so that would have been the fiscal year 2018 timeframe. The original cost of the project was just shy of $1.1 million, which represented the Smart Scale request as well. It was fully funded with district grant funds at the time. The original scope included a new retail commuter store, new bike sharing stations, real-time transit information, as well as a number of new bicycle parking locations. And the benefits associated with the project were due primarily to land use. This is just a snapshot of the details related to the project within its cohort. $1.1 million total cost, $1.1 million funded through the district grant program. It got a score of 217.4, and it ranked number 1 in the district for that cohort. To date, nothing has been spent. Arlington County last month requested cancellation of the project. The information system components and the bike components of the project were accomplished as part of other county projects. And the county is currently reviewing how its commuter stores are rolled out and considering changing some technology. And so they have requested cancellation of the project. I'll be bringing back to you that action item in March for your approval. All of the funding currently allocated to the project will be transferred back to the Northern Virginia District Grant balance entry. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
No questions? Ms. Pryor, please. Oh, Mr. Davis, please.
Thanks. Hi, Kim. I see in here you have commuter store capitalized. Can you describe what that is?
They're generally store locations where individuals can go in and get information on the various transit options in the area. You can get passes.
You can buy your Metro tickets, you can buy your VRE tickets, you can, so they're, and it's, I didn't know it was owned by Arlington. For some reason, I thought it was privately run, but.
Other questions? Ms. Pryor, please proceed to the next smart scale cancellation.
The next project is the Roslyn-Ballston Corridor Multimodal Connections Project, again in Northern Virginia. This project was submitted by Arlington County in round 2, again, fiscal year 2018 timeframe. The total cost of the project was $5.6 million. It was fully funded with district grant funds at the time. The scope of work included the purchase of 6 new transit buses, as well as protected bike lanes for a portion of the corridor. The benefits were due primarily to land use, environmental, and congestion. This is just a snapshot of where the project fell within the cohort. Again, total cost of 5.7, fully funded with district grant funds. It scored 44.8 and ranked 4 out of 21, and there have been no expenditures on the project to date. Again, Arlington County requested cancellation of this project back in January. The scope of work was completed as part of other transportation projects in the corridor by the county. And WMATA is providing the bus service that addresses the service expansion needs originally envisioned in the application. I will also be bringing a proposed resolution to cancel this project to you in March. And again, all of these funds will be transferred back to the Northern Virginia District Grant balance entry. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Sellers?
what year did the I-66 Hot Lane project, this was before or after that? When they did the whole, and I'm getting to that because this seems like this project and the previous one may have been put in before the I-66 or, you know, that inside the Beltway project, the commuter benefits and all these grant programs were made for that Northern Virginia corridor. And so maybe that's why we're seeing Arlington say we don't need this money anymore because they have a different funding stream.
Right, so a 2018 application, a fiscal year 2018 application would probably have been developed and submitted in calendar year 2016. And so, yes, a lot happens in that timeframe.
It also suggests that Arlington aggressively pursues these initiatives to other projects, and sometimes they are incorporated or included in other projects, eliminating the need for the smart scale projects. So I think their good stewardship of the funds, you know, allows us to return this money to other active uses within the district. Mr. Griffin, any comments? I know you've been briefed on these.
I have no comments, thank you.
Okay. Other questions from Ms. Pryor?
I do have one question, however. So I'm still trying to get my head around the smart scale scoring, as you know. So the first project scored like 217 and the second one like 44. So that's almost a 5-fold difference. What caused such a great disparity between the two projects? I know you said primarily land use, but land use was in both of them.
Sure, it is based on the benefits associated with each project. And of course, everything is relative in smart scale, so they're ranked according to the highest benefit for that factor area, and then the scores are calculated statewide. So the actual numerical value of the score means less than where it falls relatively speaking in the whole cohort. And cost is also a factor. The lower the cost, the higher the score, and the second project was about 5 times more costly than the first project, so.
Other questions or comments? Ms. Pryor, thank you.
Thank you.
So the secretary has asked me to hold the meeting at this point for his return for the director's items. So I'm going to call an indefinite break, but please don't stray too far, because when he returns, we're going to want to reconvene. Thank you.
Back in order. Thank you to Vice Chairman Kasperitz for presiding. In my absence, I apologize.
My pleasure, sir.
Thank you, sir, very much. We've been around about as long as each other. It's good to have you keep us straight. As I told you before, the commissioner and I were in a weather brief with the governor, the attorney general, and the lieutenant governor. And then there was a press conference. And basically, I want to say, I'll say the 3 things that he said, which was, first off, be safe in whatever you do, right? And thank goodness for the first responders and the people at VDOT, VDEM, the state police, and the National Guard. They have been through the ringer. The commissioner, I can tell you, has been through the ringer, notwithstanding how good he looks. Sunday didn't look as good as he looks today, but he's been basically 24/7 for a while, and a bunch of the rest of us as well. So it's a serious situation. We, as the governor said, we continue to be in a state of emergency in Virginia. You know, those of us who do not live in Southwest Virginia don't see necessarily every day what they're dealing with, but after recovering from Helene, which we're still recovering from, there's still lots of work to do down there that VDOT and everybody else is intimately involved in. Then we got smacked again with the ice storm, and then the floods that came after the ice storm. And I would tell you that in, sort of interestingly to me, the governor has been out in front of sort of predicting. And I remember as we were talking about the ice, he immediately pivoted to, okay, how about the floods that are coming, right? And that's exactly what we've seen. And so we've got a bunch of roads that are out. The commissioner can speak to that in his remarks. A bunch have been brought back online. There were up to 500,000 people out of power, which is more than Helene. So just, you know, they're just getting smacked once after another in Southwest. And now, after that, and the ice, and the floods, now comes the snow. And they're going to get smacked again, Becky. There's going to be a fair amount of snow in Southwest. That will come across mostly across the southern part of the state. Like Richmond South will be sort of the biggest impacts. Richmond's still looking at maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 inches of snow. Hampton and Southwest, you know, 6 to 8 to 9, depending on where you are. And then in Hampton Roads, we've reduced the number there to 8 to 12. I said reduced. Sunday, I think it was at 18 to 22. Was the numbers we were looking at. And we don't try to be, you know, extreme in our forecasters nor us are extreme. They're conservative, but not extreme. And so, you know, it's just been an all hands on deck thing with lots of people and lots of equipment. At the end of the day, we'll come back and debrief all this. But the financial reality is significant as well. We'll have a tremendous amount of money that will have been spent out of the state coffers I think our budget for this kind of stuff is about $220 million, and we've, substantially exceeded that to date, and we're not finished yet. So a lot of attention in Hampton Roads and Southwest, Eastern Shore particularly. They could get a lot of snow, and Eastern Shore just doesn't have the same level of resources due to its rural nature, so lots of focus on that. Second thing he said was, if you're not where you need to be, stay off the roads. And he said tonight, I'll tell you, tonight, tomorrow. But we expect snow to start in Southwest fairly early. It will get up here to Richmond, I think, around noon, earlier morning, 9, 10 o'clock. And then Hampton Road's probably 11 to noon, 12, 1, sometime in that. But it's going to snow for a day, at least. And it's going to be pretty heavy snow at times. And so we could see, Commissioner, and you can update me, maybe 1 inch to 2 inches an hour, which is substantial. So if people are on the roads and moving, then one, they're traveling in unsafe conditions, and two, they're in our way. And our job at VDOT is to clean those roads up so that, one, first responders can get to where they need to go, and then two, citizens can get to where they need to go. So I would encourage everybody, and the last thing he did was pray to blow it out. Hopefully the storm will just blow out and go away, and let us get back to what we do. But we don't control that, someone else does, and we're asking for assistance. So it's a serious situation. Takes a lot of effort by your VDOT people and everybody else in transportation, but everywhere across the Commonwealth. And, just think about those folks in Southwest particularly, because they've been through the ringer in the last, going back to Helene in October, I guess it was now. Catch a break. So that's what I would tell you about where we've been, and I apologize we weren't here. Lots of going on transportation. We're winding down the General Assembly. They should adjourn by Saturday. I think they're still on task to do that, from what I hear. And so we look forward for them to complete their work, and then we can complete ours and go through the process. So that's exciting. That'll be our last legislative session. And I will tell you that in some ways that's sad, and in some ways it's not. It's a really busy time. And but at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. We have a legislature to pass laws and to appropriate money, and they do that. They've been doing it for a very long time. So it's great to go through that process. I will tell you that since our last meeting, we've had the tragedy as well up in Northern Virginia with the American Airlines. I was up there that night. But the good news is we've got a heck of a National Transportation Safety Board. They take charge when these things happen, and they'll get to the bottom of it and resolve what we need to do going forward so that doesn't happen again. But that's tough stuff. I think in general, transportation's in good shape. We got a lot of work to do here. We're excited about the rest of the year coming up to dig in and do some work before this administration leaves in January. And I just want to appreciate everything y'all do to help us.
Thank you, Secretary. You did cover quite a bit of where we have been and where we are today, but let me start with just an overview of what happened last week and over the weekend. That at the height of last week's storm, we had 408 roads closed statewide. We had 358 of them due to flooding, 44 down, power lines and trees. And then at the height, we had 7 structures that were damaged, whether they were bridges being washed out or culverts being washed out. As of this morning, we have, good news is those totals are coming down quite significantly. 149 roads total. Most of them, again, are still because they're flooded. 141 flooded, 4 down power lines, and structure damage is down to 4. So those numbers continue to trend downward. We'll still be in a 24/7 posture down in Southwest Virginia, recovering. But as that snow settles in overnight, we will pivot those operations from fixing washouts and bridge repairs and culverts back to snowplow operations to be able to restore the roadways and then pivot back. Those crews are 24/7, and I'd say by and large, we started 2025 with major snowstorms, and it feels like there's been one every 3 or 4 days. So our crews really have not had a break in about 45 days. And I've got to hand it to the men and women of the department, as well as our contractors, to be able to continue to operate as well as what they have back to back to back with the storms. As the Secretary said, we are still doing the cost accounting. I would anticipate, hopefully this might be the last one. I know I shouldn't say that, but I did. If we can get through this winter and not have anything else by the middle of March, we should have a better cost accounting of where we are. At the latest, it would be April. So there's more to come on that front, and certainly what those impacts are going to be. But as we head into this storm, we're as you've seen, we develop a plan and work the plan and are successful with the plan. Part of this one is that we're going to see a little bit of a different dynamic. Hampton Roads and Southside Virginia is going to see a lot more snow than what they've typically have had. And at least with the forecast, Northern Virginia will be greatly spared, traced to no more than 3 inches, at least in the forecast, which is a good thing when we look at the mobilization levels. That is, we're the highest. We have more than 3,000 pieces of equipment moving in Northern Virginia alone when we're at full mobilization. So this will be a good shift in allowing those crews to work. But having said that, we are anticipating upwards of 12 inches or planning for up to 12 inches in the Hampton Roads district, and that district is typically not as prepared as what we have in Northern Virginia. So we're shifting resources out of Northern Virginia. We have 15 trucks coming, or snowplow trucks coming, being dedicated to the Fredericksburg district, 30 trucks from Northern Virginia to the Richmond district, and right now 95 trucks coming out of Northern Virginia to the Hampton Roads district. We've also secured an emergency contract that's going to provide some smaller vehicles, 60 vehicles, to the Hampton Roads district as well. We'll continue to reassess as the day goes on, but we are well prepared for the storm. The storm does come in as snow, which is good. So you've seen our pre-treating operations, should have seen them as you drove into Richmond last night or tonight. But all of our interstate and primaries will be pre-treated, and a number of our high-volume secondaries will also be pre-treated. We do anticipate 1 to 2 inches of snow an hour, and so this is a high-intensity storm that will be, as we get closer from Richmond east, we will see a wetter snow, a heavier snow, and so we'll have tree crews on standby throughout the Commonwealth, as well as pre-staged equipment, tow trucks, and other items to be able to help recover should crashes happen. As the Secretary said, I can't say this enough, that to those out there that are listening, please don't be on the roads during the storm. And if you absolutely have to, please give our snowplow operators the distance that they need to be able to do their job safely. They're there trying to clear the roads as soon as they can, and to be able to restore that road so that you can be on it as soon as possible. But when we're interacting with motor vehicles, passenger cars, and tractor trailers, it does become more difficult to do our job. So please let our crews do their jobs and not be there. But if you do have to be there, give us the safe distance that we need to be able to do our job safely. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. Let me just add a little bit of flavor. in Northern Virginia, as we talk about the money piece of this, and I'm only telling you this because at the end of the day, we won't need to deal with this at this board level. As I told you, we budget about $220 million a year for this kind of work. We're substantially in advance of that now. Some of this is going to depend on how we get reimbursed by FEMA. I think we're well positioned in that regard. We've done everything we need to do in terms of maximizing the reimbursement for Helene and other catastrophic stuff. But at the end of the day, in Northern Virginia, if you think about it like this, the commissioner mentioned the 3,000 pieces or so. When we're at mobilization 5, which is our high mobilization level, our highest, it's $1 million an hour that we spend. That's 24 hours a day, $1 million an hour. And so you can see just in Northern Virginia that bill gets high in a hurry. And at the end of the day, we pay that bill. We do that, but construction slides to the right. That's how it works. So if we don't have enough maintenance money, we take it out of construction. You'll remember that you approved a smart scale budget. We're in that 6th round now. We worked hard on that number to get it as high as we could get it without making sure we didn't get ourselves in trouble when these kinds of things happen. And so we'll continue to have to do that and work on that as we go forward, but it's $1 million an hour. And I should also say, I started this foray in Richmond in 1980, 45 years ago, Scott, when I came up here to be an aide to a senator from Newport News. And about this time in 1980, we had our snowmageddon, and we got like 14 inches in Norfolk, and the town was shut down, including everybody that was at the Sunday matinee for the circus and could not go home. So they had like 8,000 people stranded in Scope, snowed in. Freddie was there.
It was there.
Were you there?
And the circus was there.
And the circus was there, and you couldn't leave.
And it was my birthday.
Happy birthday, Freddie.
It's true.
Yeah, and I was here, except I wasn't here. I had gone away for the weekend and couldn't get back. We probably tarried a little longer than we might have had to, but I think we didn't get back till Tuesday night. And my boss was hoping I'd be back on Monday, but I was not. So 45 years ago, here we are again, and we're looking at that same kind of thing in Hampton Road. So as the commissioner said, we're prepared, we're ready to go. But we're not used to 12 and 14 inches in Hampton Roads, and we're scurrying around doing what we need to do, but we're in good shape. The last thing I'd say is I wanted to give a shout out to the MWA folks and our CEO up there. They got such high praise from everybody during this latest disaster up there. They ran a flawless operation in terms of running the airport. Now, it was not our job to run the rescue and recovery. The plane was in the Potomac. The Potomac is part of Washington, D.C., so they led that. But obviously, the airport's in Virginia and is part of our transportation infrastructure in Virginia. And so our folks at MWA just did an outstanding job. I can't tell you how much praise we got from both American and from the National Transportation Safety Board. So I want to recognize them and those folks up there, and we'll continue to work through that. So it's been a busy time in transportation. We got a lot to do here, and I'll turn the next remarks over to our DRPT director, Stephanie Robinson. She's been busy too.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you, Commissioner, for all your hard work. I realize I'm standing between the board and lunch, and so my updates might not be as pressing as the commissioners, but
keep it to 20 minutes.
I can keep it shorter than that. You all have my director's report in your package, so I just wanted to provide a couple high-level highlights. I know that last time we met, I mentioned that we had some preliminary ridership numbers for November regarding Virginia agency, that's non-WMATA and VRE ridership. We did in fact meet those preliminary numbers, and so I'm proud to announce that we are finally above our 2019 pre-pandemic ridership levels. That's really good. We had 4.9 million riders in November of 2024, and that's 2% higher than November of 2019 and 14% higher year over year. And if I can kind of switch hats and put on my VPRA chair hat for a moment, I also want to talk about the ridership on Amtrak, because our Virginia-supported Amtrak service set another record this year with 1.39 million rides in 2024. December 2024 was the highest ridership month ever for our 8 Virginia-supported Amtrak round-trip trains. And since 2019, Virginia-supported Amtrak ridership is up over 45%. So that's incredible progress we're making on ridership. Second, quick update is I just wanted everyone to be aware that on January 10th, the Federal Railroad Administration announced that Virginia won 8 rail crossing elimination grants. We call those RCE grants. These projects are going to improve major railroad crossings, improving safety, reliability, and speed of rail service. And DRPT provided intense technical assistance and matching funds on 5 of those 8 awards. So those are all detailed in my report, but they are all in Chesapeake, Richmond, Suffolk, Henrico County, and Ashland. So congratulations, and we're proud of that work as well. And finally, I wanted to just mention that the board should all have received in an email from Carol the VPRA and VRE budgets over the past couple weeks. Those are required to be sent to the board by code by February 1st. The VRE budget has been approved by MVTC and PRTC, and it is simply an awareness for the board. The VPRA budget, typically you will receive a full presentation by the executive director at VPRA, and you will still receive that. I didn't want anyone to think that's not coming. You will have the opportunity to approve that budget. That the work that's going on in VPRA, there are still some extensive final negotiations happening on the Long Bridge and Franconia bypass projects. So VPRA has opted to hold and come back in the spring and present to you the updates from the budget that you just received, as well as a full presentation, and give you the chance to answer questions on that budget later in the spring. That's all for me, Mr. Secretary. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of any of us? Great. Hearing none, we are going to take a short recess for lunch. And I am recessing the meeting, and we'll be back in about 40 minutes. I should have mentioned that Captain Byers had a work situation. You know, he's still part of law enforcement. They wouldn't let him leave quite yet. And they had a bit of a, not a bit, they had a serious incident down in his neck of the woods yesterday, and he's still involved with that. And so send your thoughts and prayers to him as one of those first responders. And he'll hopefully get through that and be back with us. May be in later, but probably not. So keep him in your thoughts, please. With that, the first item on our agenda is a public comment session. Do we have any public comment? We have no public comment today. Anybody from the public feel compelled to come speak? We're certainly willing to hear you and look forward to it. All right, hearing none, I'll move to the approval of minutes. The minutes were distributed in your package. Are there any comments or questions? Mr. Lawson.
Not sure if it's a comment, but maybe a clarification. Agenda item 8 had to do with I-81 Corridor Improvement Program, and it's got Lawson moves to amend the resolution to ensure new high-risk projects noted in the resolution to be analyzed as part of the ongoing review. I recall making a motion to incorporate, I had them as 6 items. We'd been to the meeting in
5.
Lexington. There were 5, but then there was one that was added by the committee. And then I do remember a subsequent follow-up, and I took it as a friendly amendment from Mr. Laird, and we had a discussion about.
You made the motion, Mr. Laird made the second.
Okay.
And is that? And the motion was that we would include the 5 projects into the plan, but we would also include them simultaneously into the analysis of those and all the other follow-on projects, so that we would have the benefit of another look-see of those 5 projects.
Okay.
That's what we did. That's what the motion and the second, and that was actually Mr. Laird's suggestion.
That's what I recall as well, and it was to refresh the analysis
Exactly.
from 18 to the present. I think you
100%.
actually brought that to the attention of the body, and we all thought that was a good idea to look at it under today's
So
lens.
let's make sure that not part of it, it was just the next 5 projects that had been recommended by the 81 committee were added to the program and also added to the list of projects that would be analyzed going forward. And so that we'd have the benefit of the analysis. As I said at the time, we move those things around as it makes sense to do so, and we'll continue to do that in future years, so.
And the only other item, thank you for clarifying that, the only other item that I'd bring, because I did attend the 81 committee in Lexington, as did several other members, it was my recollection that there was another one that actually I spoke to, and that's why I recall it, that was also added to the mix by that committee, and that was the 3 lanes from the Route 50 interchange to the West Virginia line to be
We'll go
studied.
back and look at that.
Thank
If we've
you.
got time, go back and look at that. We'll go back and look at that.
With that, I have no other comments to the minutes.
What else? So with that note, is there a motion to approve?
So,
Folks moved, I think. And
Second.
Mr. Lawson seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you, Mr. Prezioso. Welcome. Hope you're doing well today. What's the one thing you want to remember when you leave? If you're not where you need to be at midnight tonight, don't go. Stay off the
Ask
road.
permission to the man to your right.
I know, I had the same issue. I made that mention on the dais. Does that mean I don't have to be at work in the morning? I can walk, so I think that's okay. But stay off the roads, folks. Let us do our work. Be safe. It's going to be impactful, starting tonight and through Wednesday into Thursday. Mr. Prezioso.
Good afternoon, sir.
Item number 1, action on commemorative naming the request of Lee County, the bridge on Route 654, Hurricane Bridge Road, Lee County over Martin Creek as the Nathaniel Clayton Ewing MD Memorial Bridge located within the Bristol District. Sir.
Yes, sir. The Lee County Board of Supervisors enacted a resolution in December of last year to honor the life and service of Nathaniel Clayton Ewing, MD. Dr. Ewing was born in May of 1913 and lived his whole life in Lee County. He graduated from Emory and Henry College and the University of Virginia Medical School, and he spent his entire career serving the citizens of Lee County. In addition to being a doctor in the community, he was on organizations such as the Jonesville Fire Department. He supported them for over 50 years. He volunteered his services at the county jail, and he was also the team doctor for the Jonesville High School. He's covered a lot of ground. He was director of one of the local authorities. He was director of a local bank. He was also mayor of Jonesville for a short while as well. And he was one of these old school doctors. He practiced his work from his office, from his home office. He also went and made house calls. So he was that special breed of doctor. He owned and worked a farm, and he was an avid hunter and fisherman. And he passed away in April of 1985, and the Lee County Board would ask that we consider this for a naming.
Mr. Folks, as somebody with substantial interaction with Emory and Henry,
Yes, sir.
I think it's particularly fitting for you to be able to make a motion here today.
Proud to do so. Also, it's worth noting that Ewing is also a community in Lee County, and so his roots were highly respected physician and a citizen of Lee County, as Robbie pointed out.
Ms. Sellers seconds. Is there further discussion? If you will join me, if you're in the affirmative, we'll rise and show our support. Thank you, Dr. Ewing. Next item is item number 2, action on commemorative naming at the request of the town of Clarksville of the section of U.S. Highway 58 Business, Virginia Avenue from the intersection of U.S. Highway 58 bypass at the western boundary of the town of Clarksville to the intersection of U.S. Highway 15 at the eastern side of the Phillips St. Julian Wilson Bridge as the police officer Harvey Glenn Lawson Jr., Unit 12, Memorial Highway, located within the Richmond District. Mr. Prezioso.
Thank you, sir. Again, the Town Council of Clarksville enacted a resolution in September of last year to honor the life, service, and the ultimate sacrifice of Officer Harvey Glenn Lawson Jr. to his community. According to that resolution, Officer Lawson was a brave officer for the town of Clarksville Police. He was a 1981 graduate of Bluestone High School. He graduated also from the Central Virginia Justice Academy, Class 21 Basic LE Law Enforcement School in June of 1984. He was a loving brother, son, husband, and proud father of 2 daughters, Chris and Beth. In March of 1985, Officer Lawson and Sergeant Ricky Wilkinson were in pursuit of a DUI driver. The understanding was that driver was out looking for someone who had arrested him earlier in the day. And they stopped this individual, and the individual started shooting, and there was a shootout. And although the officers returned fire, Officer Harvey Glenn was shot and killed in the line of duty. However, his brave and heroic actions of tracking down this individual actually helped to save another officer, and it was a good protection to the community. This location also touches 2 other communities, Mecklenburg County and Halifax County, and both have also indicated their support of this resolution. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Prezioso. Mr. Davis.
Secretary, I motion to approve.
So Mr. Davis moves, Ms. Sellers seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor, please rise to signify your support. Thank you, Officer Lawson. Next item on the agenda is item number 3. Mr. Heltzel has joined us. It's the action on location approval for the Marina Way extension from Gordon Boulevard, Route 123 to Annapolis Way, located within the Northern Virginia District. Mr. Heltzel, thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. This project is part of the Prince William County North Woodbridge Small Area Plan. It also extends the Marina Way from the Gordon Boulevard intersection to its intersection with Annapolis Way. The project also provides for safe pedestrian accessibility and connectivity in the North Woodbridge area, some traffic congestion relief for the traffic demand on local roads and intersections, and provides access to local businesses, homes in the North Woodbridge area and is consistent with the existing and planned local development. The project does have federal funding, so we have secured from the Federal Highway Administration the approval of an environmental assessment document. A location hearing was held for the project in October, and it has been endorsed by the County Board of Supervisors. And I'm here to ask for favorable dispensation on the location.
Ribbon.
I move to approve it.
Is there further discussion? Mr. Gribben moved, Ms. Sellers seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Pryor, item number 4, action on revised FY 23 through 30 6-year improvement program transfers December 6, 24 through January 10, 25. And before Ms. Pryor gets started, let me give you some introduction here. So, over the last few days, as we got into some of this transfer, some of these transfers, I became aware of a question Mr. Lawson had asked about some money some carbon grant money that we were putting on one of these projects, and whether that carbon grant money might get caught up in the federal slowdown or freeze or clawback. And so what did that all mean? And the answer is, we don't know what anything means yet. We just know that expenditures are being scrutinized. We support that, and they'll get through their process and determine what, if any, grants are changed or suspended or clawed back or continued. But in the meantime, it got us into a more deep discussion, and it became, I became aware that in this transfer process, one of the things we've started to do routinely, which is a good thing to do for efficiency and for keeping things moving and to get projects out, is we have some other funds that we sometimes introduce into our various projects. So even in a smart scale project, if it's a district grant project, we might put funds that come from other places to help fill the gaps as we're seeing these gaps. And that's a good thing because, one, we're getting the project moving, we're getting it out, and we're using that money so it's not eaten up in inflation like we're seeing. And so we do that with carbon grants, and there's some other grants that we have. And those grants are very, very flexible in general, right? Those grants can go lots of places. They could go to other kinds of projects. They could go outside of smart scale. They could go inside of smart scale. And there's a pool of those funds that we get. In the carbon case, I think it's maybe 11, 12, 13, $15 million a year. It's not a huge number. But the staff has begun a process where they're allocating those funds, just trying to fit the puzzle together, frankly, and trying to get things done and trying to get them out the door. And I think that makes a lot of sense, except that I think it's very important that the board understand when we vote on things, that we're taking funds that might be used in one district or in one project, and we're putting them somewhere else. So unlike when we reallocate district grant balances, those are balances that are restrained and restricted within the district, right? And they're not going anywhere else. If you got leftover district grant money, that's where the money is. It's being worked in the district. We get with the district members or the members that live in those districts, and we sort of work through this transfer business, and we've changed our procedure to make it more efficient over the last few months, and I think that's been good work on the part of our staff and our board. But I was concerned that each of us knows when we're doing this reallocation of funds, and the only place we really see it is in the transfer, is that we could have taken that money and put it in a project in Ms. Dunlop's district if we wanted to, or Dr. Smoot's, or Ms. Sellers, or Mr. Laird's, or Mr. Goods, or whoever else's. It's not a restricted pot. And so I want our eyes on that as we're doing that. I commend what the staff is doing. I think there's a lot of sense for that. But I paused all that for this month and said, we're going to get eyes on this and make sure the board, and the board could say, hey, we could make a policy that says, have the staff keep doing what they're doing. We could have a policy that says, explain to us where this money comes from and where else it might go before I vote. We can set the policy that we want that we're comfortable with in terms of handling this money, but we have not yet to date. And so I stopped those from being on the transfer portal. I've pledged to our staff that I intend to get this resolved by next month, because these are going to hold up projects if we hold up grants, but so much longer, those things won't be able to progress. So I just want to dive into it a little bit more deeply, understand it, so we can come back and brief the board, and then the board can make decisions on how they'd like to proceed in terms of those approvals. And again, it could be have our staff have at it and just give us a report. It could be give us a report in advance and let us decide. It could be all sorts of things, but we weren't prepared to address that in a fulsome way today. So I stopped a number of transfers. So they were taken out of your report, and they're not in here for today. But our intention is to bring them back to tomorrow. And I apologize to the staff because this is a really complicated sort of process of fitting puzzle pieces together that have different restrictions and different times and all sorts of different things. And they're just trying to get work done and get the projects moving. So the intentions are all good here. But I think it's important that the board have full transparency and they get to weigh in on the policies that we use in terms of allocating money. If you remember, in the old days, that's like how everything was done. We just sat in a room and decided what projects were getting done. And we don't do that anymore for good reason, and we get much better results the way we're doing it today. And so that's where we are. So you will have noticed that in what you got a couple days ago was changed overnight, and some of those transfers were removed. We will bring them back in April, hopefully with a process recommended to you so that we can move forward and we won't have more than a month's delay. Any questions about that?
Mr. Secretary,
Yes, sir.
are these carbon grants, are they geographic specific?
Some are. And so part of the, and they're not just carbon grants, there's others as well. But some of them are so specific they can only go one place. And in those cases, I think we ought to have a policy that says, if they can only go one place, put them in one place, right? But if they can go 28 places, I think we need to know that before we decide, before we just see it on a piece of paper and just agree to it because we don't understand. So yes, and a bunch of them are geographic by population size restricted. But there's other grants other than the carbon grants we're doing the same things with. So again, I think it was a good intention, efficiency process. I just want the board to have eyes on it, so we can't come back later and say, we didn't know, we didn't understand that, right? It seemed like more de rigueur than something we had lots of options with. So does that answer your question, sir? Okay. Anyone else? So apologies to Ms. Pryor, I put her through a bit of a fire drill yesterday, she and her team, and she's fantastic, and I hate to do that, but I thought it was the right thing to do. So Ms. Pryor, with that, will you please continue?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I appreciate that explanation. With that said, before you is the revised transfer report, and I recommend your approval.
That's why we love her.
So moved.
The train is gone. Mr. Lawson moves, Mr. Davis seconds. Is there further discussion? Oh, Mr. Good did, I'm sorry. Is there further discussion? Thank you, sir. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you, Ms. Pryor. Next is item number 5, action on rail industrial access, Hitachi Energy in Halifax County, located within the Lynchburg District. Mr. Todd.
Mr. Secretary, members of the board, thank you for having me again this afternoon. Hitachi Energy has applied for $175,000 of rail industrial access funding, supporting their $26 million investment in Virginia, creating 100 new jobs. Their application exceeds the minimum scoring criteria, and therefore we recommend your approval.
Is there any comments or questions?
Motion to approve.
Ms. Green moves. Ms. Sellers seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Any abstentions? Thank you, Mr. Todd.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Not Mr. Coker.
I'm a little taller than he.
Mr. Coker had so much fun that he delegated upwards.
He's a smart man, sir.
Yes. Mr. Thrasher, thank you for
Sir.
being here, sir.
Sir, members of the board, today I bring you 12 projects for bid. Normally, Mr. Coker would be doing these, but 5 of these projects are paving projects that have a single bidder. In our last meeting in January, there was some discussion on that. So I thought I would come in and bring some more oversight to these types of projects. So First and foremost, these jobs are $5 million or more asphalt projects. That's the more complex, the larger types of projects that we have a selective clientele for the contractors that we have. There's limited competition in these geographical areas, and that's just the nature of the beast. We have batch plants. We don't tell them where to put them. They put their batch plants where they think it's the most economical and the best for their business. We've had an overall increase in work over the last several years, a substantial increase in work. So contracts we would have gotten more than one bid on, contractors now are only going with one single bid. They don't need the work. Also, this is the point of our year where 95 to 97% of our contracts are out, and that means that the contractors already have the work that they're going to do, so they're very selective about the type of work that they go after. So, Mr. Secretary, if you would bear with me a little bit, this will be a little bit different, but I think we'll get through it.
Please, sir.
So first up is order number 141, Smith and Washington counties. It's plants mix job. We had two bidders. The low bid was in within range of the evaluative estimate. The contractor is W&L Construction, and the bid was $5.5 million. We think it's a good bid and recommend approval.
Comments or questions? Is there a motion to approve?
Secretary, I move approval.
Mr. Folks moves. Is there a second? Ms. Dunlap seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. With any abstentions? Thank you very much. Before you continue, let me just add some flavor to, and I've done this before, but I'll continue to remind you. A few years back, 6 years back, I think, 7 years back, we had a small subcommittee of this board that worked very hard on trying to make sure that the estimating that we were doing gave us the proper guardrails on which to make these decisions. So we did that particularly with these kinds of things in mind, where because of location, because of supply chains, because of whatever, you have fewer bids than more bids. And that is not a comfortable place for most people in a bidding process. For a buyer, it's not the best place to be. And so we worked really hard to do that, and a lot of the folks here were involved in that. And so when you see that within range, that should give you some comfort that it is within the range that we thought was reasonable before we opened the bid. And so we set those to help this board particularly. And as you have heard me say, if we start seeing a lot of things outside the range, right? If you never saw a bid that was inside the range, ever, on any project, you would have to say your range is not valid, right? And so as we see these ones come through that are outside the range, it makes us pay a little bit more attention to that project, whether the range is reasonable or not. And sometimes you would particularly hear Mr. Coker say why that he felt that range was reasonable, even though, or that the bid was reasonable even when it was outside the range. So that's our guardrail, that's sort of our true north that we sort of judge these things by. It's not perfect. And I will continue to push and ask as we see, if we see too many outside the range, that why is that? And is that a range problem? Is that a different, what is that problem? But I would just think it'd be good for you all to keep that in mind. Yes, sir, Mr. Gribben.
Secretary, just out of curiosity, so what is the range? Like for this project, what was the range?
We don't tell you.
Okay.
Because then we would tell everybody what the ranges are and they'd be able to sort of.
And the range is plus or minus how much percent?
Mr. Gibbon, I'll be more than glad to answer that afterwards.
Okay.
We'll do that offline.
Great. And then, and at the same time, there's no urgency around this. It'd be also helpful to know just, how do we set the range? Like, what are we using in terms of benchmark to set it?
Next project.
We'll have that discussion.
Single bid, Smith County, plant mix on the Interstate I-81. It came in at roughly $5.7 million. By W&L Construction, we believe was within range. Now, before I request approval approval of this, I'd like for you to look at something. So what we've done here is what's in the red circle is the project itself. The red lines on 81 are the approximate location of the actual paving jobs. And so the bullets or the round circles are the batch plants. So you can see on this particular instance, we have two individual bidders, W&L and Adams. What I've done at the very bottom is I've gone in and looked at the area that's the furthest away from the project, which is the most conservative view a contractor is going to look at. On a normal basis, contractors are looking at anywhere from about 45 minutes to an hour for a truck haul, normally. Now again, if in the summertime or the winter, that affects the temperature of the asphalt. What you don't want to have is the asphalt gets to the site and doesn't have the properties that we want for the roadway. It becomes inflexible. When it gets cold, can't work it, we reject it. So again, at the very bottom there, you'll see that the Glade Spring plant for W&L, 73 Ramblewood Drive, to Atkins, which is the furthest point. I don't know if this clicker, yes, there's Atkins. That's the furthest point. That time was 28 minutes. The blue signifies, the highlighted in blue signifies who actually won the contract. Adams is located here in Hillsville. The shortest distance between here and this point, 7 Mile Forward, was 54 minutes. Obviously, Adams is not going to pursue that job because of the distance it's going to take. So with that in mind, we think the bid is fair, and we recommend approval.
Comments or questions? Ms. Sellers?
Thank you for sharing this map and showing that, because that gives a lot of perspective that I think gets lost just when we see just the slide, especially when you put these plants in these different locations, and maybe it's out in Western Virginia, it might be different. But I know in Stafford, the one plant which came up last time, there's not much appetite by the locals to put in too many more plants in the Fredericksburg, in the populated parts of Fredericksburg. So these plants, expanding them or putting in new plants is very hard to get through local governments. And I don't know if people maybe recognize that in the same way that somebody who's been on a board of supervisors or a planning commission or presented before a board of supervisors, maybe on behalf of these applicants, would know. But these plants are loud, they're dirty, they have trucks with beeping things on them, and none of their neighbors like them. So, putting this up here and showing the distance gives a lot of perspective and that nuance that isn't captured when you just give us the slide. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're hard to get permitted,
Very hard.
and a lot of people don't like them. And we don't determine where they are. Although, whenever you're in government, if you're like me in government, we're gonna defer, we're going to point towards the private sector for everything. But if the private sector won't deliver it, then you start looking at public sector solutions. And like if nobody would put a plant in Virginia, we got none, we'd have to do something. But supply and demand generally works, but understand the supply is heavily impacted by regulation and by local governments. And so that makes it more difficult for all of us in terms of getting better pricing by more supply, because they're hard to get new ones. And so they sort of are where they are, and we deal with that. Ms. Thrasher. Number 458. We didn't vote.
We haven't moved on the other one.
Well, you got so many pretty pictures, we're just gonna move on by. All right, so we got number 142. We had a motion and we didn't have a motion in a second?
I so moved, Mr.
And I got all confused. Mr. Folks moved, Dr. Smoot second. All right, I'm back on track. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. With any abstentions? Thank you. Number 458.
So the next one is a plant mix interstate in Goochland and Henrico counties on I-64. We had two bids. The low bid was approximately $6.4 million by Alan Myers. It's within the evaluated estimate range. We consider it a good bid, and we ask for your approval.
Secretary, I move approval.
Davis moves, Ms. Sellers seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. All opposed, say no. Are there any abstentions? Order number 649.
Sir, this is a plant mix on the interstate in Caroline, Stafford, Spotsylvania counties. We had 3 bidders. The low bid was $5.1 million. With Virginia Paving, it was within the evaluated estimate range. We consider it a good bid and request your approval.
Sellers moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Davis seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Item number 864 in Stanton District.
It's an interstate job on I-81 in Rockbridge County. We had 1 bid. The low bid was approximately $5.7 million by Adams Construction. Again, the project itself is here. It's on I-81. So you have a plant with Adams located in Lexington. The closest large-scale plant we have besides that is Superior. So I took the exit that's on the furthest away, which would be here, the Natural Bridge exit, exit 175 off 81. Adams was roughly 14 minutes away compared to 55 minutes for Superior. Obviously, that's the reason why we got 1 bid, or one of the reasons. We consider it to be a good bid, and we would request your approval.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Mr. Laird moves, Mr. Coleman seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Item number 865.
Again, a plant mix on I-81, Rockbridge County. This project is north of the one that I showed you earlier. Low bid was 5.8 by Adams. It's within the evaluative estimate range. So here's the project here, north of the one we showed earlier. So took 2 different points. Buena Vista, which is off of I-81 here, and then Maple Hall, which is up here, 195 exit. So you look at those, both of those, 44 minutes, 49 minutes for Superior. Obviously, Adams is much quicker on being able to get to that project.
Chairman, I move approval.
Good moves. Mr. Laird seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Order number 259.
Sir, this is a Giles Carroll County primary mix. The low bid was $5.8 million by Adams Construction, which is within the evaluative estimate range. This is in one of the more remote areas for us. It's outside of Hillsville. Here's the projects. You can see 2 different areas here. One is on Hillsville itself, and the other is Dougspur, Virginia, located here. The distances were taken below. Adams is, again, closer to this particular project than W&L or the Withville plant. We believe it represents good value, and we recommend approval.
Move approval.
Dr. Smoot moves. Ms. Dunlop seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Order number 967.
Sir, it's a plant mix on primaries in Prince William and Loudoun counties. We had 3 bidders. The low bid was approximately $5 million by Superior. We believe it's within range, represents good value, and we request your approval.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Mr. Cribbin moves, Ms. Sellers seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Order 981.
Sir, plant mix on the interstate system in Arlington, Prince William, and Fairfax counties. We had 4 bidders. The low bid was approximately $5.8 million by Virginia Paving. It's within the evaluative estimate range. We recommend approval.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Mr. Gribbin. Ms. Sellers seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Item number 145 in Bristol.
Sir, this is a plant mix on primaries, Grayson, Wythe, and Bland counties. The low bid was approximately $6.9 million by W&L Construction. Again, here you can see the the area of the work within the red circle. We took two different geographical positions, Bastion, Virginia, which is located up here, as well as Ceres, located here in the western end, ran the distances on them. W&L was closer to the projects, to the worst-case scenario than Adams. We think it represents good value, and we recommend approval.
Is there a motion to approve?
Secretary, I move approval.
Mr. Folks moves.
Second.
Mr. Coleman seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Any abstentions? Thank you. Order number 983.
Sir, 2025 plant mix primary in Arlington and Fairfax counties, we had 4 bids. The low bid was approximately $5.7 million by Allen Myers. We think it represents, it's within the range of the evaluated estimate. We believe it represents good value and recommend approval.
So moves.
Griffin moves. Ms. Sellers seconds. Excuse me, Ms. Green seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. And our final one, number DB 120 in the Salem District.
Sir, this is Route 58 Vesta. It's a design-build project in Patrick County. We had 3 bidders. The best value bid came in at approximately $165 million within our range. We believe it represents good value, and we recommend approval.
Your
Move
motion?
approval.
Dr. Smoot moves. Is there a second? Ms. Sellers seconds. Is there further discussion?
A question on the size of this?
Big job.
Yeah. So what is this?
It's a small project for you in Northern Virginia. This is on Route 58. It is mainly a rock job, but it's on 58. It's a couple miles there that we're actually widening from 2 to 4 lanes. Very remote area, Virginia.
4.5 miles, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Questions, Secretary?
Sir.
Have we looked
Mr.
at
Lawson.
the area where is this the same part of the road that was completely wiped out?
No, sir.
Okay,
That's in Damascus.
okay. Is that underway, or?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We can have some comments about that in a second.
Thank you.
All right, so do we have a motion and a second? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you, Mr. Thrasher. Appreciate it very much. I will ask the commissioner to give us a little bit of an update, since the question was asked on 58 and the 3-mile stretch down in Damascus that was basically wiped out in Hurricane Helene. Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Lawson, with regard to Route 58 in the Bristol District in Damascus that was washed out with Hurricane Helene, we went through an emergency contract, procured a contractor through that process, and that contractor was put to work, I want to say October 18th, if memory serves correctly. That contractor's been progressing the work through since that point in time. That contractor's done a tremendous job throughout the winter season. We've had great weather up until the January timeframe, and then we've had hit or miss. The contractor was fortunate that the interactions with the regulatory agencies weren't as significant as what we thought, and is significantly ahead of schedule at this point. Most of the roadbed is laid right now. We are having some discussions with Washington County Water Authority right now for some water line work to be done in the vicinity or on the road itself. We anticipate putting down an intermediate driving course, hopefully sometime no later than May, and have the facility open to traffic, local traffic at that point in May. And once the Water Authority's work is done later this summer, put the final driving course down and have the road fully restored to its original character. So well in advance of a 1-year turnaround, and our costs are coming in less than anticipated. So that's a good thing as well.
Thank you, that's impressive.
Very impressive. And I will tell you that while I know we did a great job on our end, the anticipated regulatory and federal involvement because it was next to a river that ate it up was not nearly as significant as we had thought it might be. And that not only accelerated the time a lot, it also decreased the price a lot. And so, you know, the point being is that whether they bring you value or don't, that's a different decision. But that process costs a lot of money to get through. And we didn't have it in this case. And so we saved a lot of money and we saved a lot of time. And so bring that road back to full capability by the summertime. And it's open. It's already open partially, right? Partially. I thought we can move down, up and down it, but.
Our vehicles, the construction
Passable.
equipment can travel on the road, be able to perform the work
And when
that's
will it be
due.
open to traffic?
May of this year.
May.
We'll have the intermediate driving course down, and then we'll wait until the water line is finished, and then we'll put down the final driving course later this summer.
And as I understand it, the difference between the intermediate and the driving is not something that the public will be concerned about. It's basically sort of the last coat of topping asphalt that's important, but you drive just fine without it.
Fine without it.
And so from a practical point, people will be in full use by that time, which would be great. Good work, sir. All right, that concludes the meeting today. I'll remind you of one thing. If you're not where you want to go by midnight, stay where you are. Have a great day. Thank you so much for all you do. This meeting's adjourned.